Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Patrick of Untamed to talk about like creatures seeking their own forms, out October 8th. How's it going with you?
Oh, not too bad.
Let's get right into this because you really caught me off guard with this record, with the sound, with the atmosphere, with everything that you put together for this album. And where I want to start is the overall conception of the record. How do you approach an album as eclectic as this record is?
I definitely started with like the general idea first of the whole album, and then from there kind of think of what the individual songs would be. I don't know, I guess for this album I just wanted to do something a little bit more darker, a little bit more guitar orientated than the last one, so I just kind of use that as the jumping off point. um yeah.
If you try to explain to somebody who's never heard of the band and they want to pick up this record, how do you define the sound? How do you define the band on this album? Is there a genre? Is there an umbrella that you can use as a category for it?
For overall, I would say like epic folk metal, I suppose, would be the closest thing that you could say. But for this album, it definitely is kind of has a blackened element to it, and it's a little bit experimental, even sort of avant-garde or whatever. So it's pretty hard to to nail down, unfortunately. I don't know, this album just kind of turned out weird, really.
I think the weirdness of the album is what makes it so special and what makes it so interesting. Did you set goals for yourself coming into this record that you wanted to achieve with this album?
Yeah, I definitely kind of had a general idea before starting even writing. I don't know how defined it really was though. Just kind of like a vibe that I wanted to go for, kind of just like a darker, more esoteric even vibe. Um, I guess it worked out pretty much.
Do you look at the record as a little bit of a continuation of who you are as an individual, not just who you are as a musician, and the eclecticness that it has?
To a certain extent, I would say so. Um, it's kind of hard to say exactly, but it definitely feels a bit more mature than Between the Winds, probably just because I have a little bit more of an idea of what I'm doing with everything, with the recording and mixing and everything.
When you started the creative process behind this record, when you start to put things together and songs start to take shape, is there any time during that process that something comes up and you say, okay, even for this album, this feels a little bit too much out there, and I'm gonna like scrap this completely? Or were you completely open to anything that came to you, and if it felt right, it felt right, and who cares about everything else?
Yeah, there was actually like an entire song that got cut. I think it was like 10 minutes long, and I was just like,
So
wow,
it's not
this
just a
doesn't work.
piece, you got the whole track.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what I was thinking with with this one. So yeah, I didn't make it. I think it turns out good though, because it keeps the runtime down. It would have just been too long, I think. I like the kind of 45-minute mark, like how that turned out. So yeah, sometimes you just go down a rabbit hole and it just doesn't work out. So
Will that song ever see the day of light?
uh probably not. I might have to listen to it again and see if I can do something with it, but it was pretty weird, man.
Really? Like, I'm super curious now because this album has some weird mixtures into it. And if this one was weird, like, how weird was it?
I don't know how to describe it. It was just like it didn't really make sense. Like it wasn't overly kind of Western sounding, except in a couple spots, and it was just like a lot of even sort of like chugs, like some modern metal like chugs were like coming in for randomly, and I was just like, I don't know about this. So
There was no breakdowns, was there?
no like real breakdowns. It was just a little bit more rhythmic maybe, but yeah, I don't know what I was thinking.
I think that's the only thing you didn't throw at this album was like some crazy breakdowns and some blasts. I think that's the only thing missing from how eclectic this record is. Well, what was most challenging for you, a debut album or a sophomore record? Or perhaps more troublesome in terms of being a little bit more difficult to nail?
I would say this one. So the follow up, the first one was kind of like conceived really quick and written pretty quick, like in a span of a couple months. And I don't know, it was just kind of like I had the idea and the inspiration. It was just like kicked in. So that one, I was actually there were some moments on that where it was just like the music was just like writing itself. I was like, yeah, it does this and it does this. But this one, I think overall it took like 2 years or something to like just write, because I just wrote whenever I had time and I had an actual idea. So yeah, it was kind of torturous at certain parts. Just like, man, it's just kind of slow going, really.
The album has what I consider a perfect flow from song to song. There's always a sense of continuity there. Each song has its own DNA. Each song has its own fingerprint, if you will, but they're so well interconnected that the complete listening experience feels as one. How much time do you spend on the track listing in order to get that flow? And how much do you tweak the songs in order for them to fit the way they currently do?
It mostly just starts, I would say, from the beginning, and just knowing that that's kind of how I want it to go. But then, like, while you're writing the songs, you're just kind of open to the different excursions, and you just kind of know the flow of it without necessarily like mapping it out completely. I don't know, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint or really like nail down. I don't know. I guess I don't really think about it that much, but I know that's what I want to do. So it just kind of happens.
But when you look at the final product, what do you feel that sense of continuity from track to track gives the overall experience of the record?
It definitely, I definitely would say it kind of like is a descent, and then like a upwards sort of feel at the very end. It kind of gets more dark and serious and intense as it goes along, but then it starts to like lift you up probably around the second half of the last metal song and then into the final song. So I think that worked out pretty good.
You mentioned Western, and I have to ask you this. If there was ever a spaghetti Western, black metal influence, would this be the soundtrack for it?
I guess it would have to be it.
I,
That'd be quite interesting to see.
I love how you brought these worlds that seem so far apart from each other. You brought them together in a very flawless, uncompromising way. And I think that's one of the beauties that this record has to offer. And you also mentioned folk. So how many instruments in total did you use on this record? Because there's a lot of stuff coming at the listener.
Most of the guitar instruments I played, and then the rest are like keyboard patches, basically. I think I actually played banjo. I have a banjo that I can only like sort of play, but good enough to like record stuff with it. So banjo, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass. Then I think the rest is like keyboard stuff. And then there were some like session bits that I got people to record.
Wow, it's still a lot. Still a lot. It's still a lot of moving pieces. How do you deal with all of these different moving pieces? Because that's one of the things about this record is that there's a lot of different layers. There's a lot of things happening, not just from song to song, but within the songs themselves. How do you organize it all in order for it to make sense?
Well, the first, like, usually I write everything in like a tab software, Guitar Pro, and it has all the guitar stuff, but it has like other stuff you can add too. So it's easy just to like add an instrument, just add it, and then write what you need to, and then move on. But it's kind of hard because the sounds in there aren't that good, or I mean they're good, but they're not like realistic. They're not what is actually going to be sounding like. So once you start recording it, it can get pretty like mind bending to figure out how everything's going to blend together. So that kind of took a while.
Is that why it took 2 years?
Well, 2 years was even just the writing of it.
Oh, it's
The
okay.
actual like recording and mixing was like a year basically. Probably a little bit less than a year, but yeah.
Are you a methodic kind of guy? Like you like to make sure everything is perfect? Are you a perfectionist?
I feel like I kind of am, but I feel like nothing is even close to being perfect that I've done. So it's kind of like, oh,
So
it's just, I think the nature of the project is just, you have to do so much. If you're trying to do like some kind of cinematic thing, it's just, you have to throw everything in it basically.
you're imperfect perfectionist.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
Striving perfectionist.
striving perfectionist. I like that one better. We've talked about the sound. I want to talk about the vocals. What role do you see the vocals playing on a record like this with this kind of soundscape?
Yeah, for this one, it's kind of sort of like the narrator almost, sort of like definitely the vocals. Like I'm not really screaming like really crazy or doing anything really intense, but it sort of just like moves along the music. Like the music is going and the vocals just kind of like take you along with it, I would say, and just kind of convey the lyrics basically.
They help the overall atmosphere of the songs as well.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I'm thinking about maybe switching it up with the vocals, like adding in different kinds of vocals um for the next album, but we'll see how that goes.
I really liked the vocals on this record. I felt like they were consistent, and like you said, they felt a little bit like a narrator of the story. But the record is so strong musically that you could almost listen to it just in an instrumental format.
Yeah, I definitely like write all the music first, like all completely first, and then I go back and listen to it and figure out where the vocals would make sense to come in, and then I write lyrics to like fit where that would be. So that's the basic flow of it.
Is the lyrical process in terms of writing the lyrics down, is that tedious for you? And when you look at of how much is happening on the musical side, or do you enjoy the lyrical content as well?
No, I actually do like writing the lyrics quite a bit, just because it is a lot different than writing the music. You're kind of like using a different part of your brain almost, and you're kind of listening to the music as an outsider at that point, just kind of like what it evokes in you. um yeah, it's just kind of a different I find it kind of relaxing even to like just like sit and think about images and stuff that would go along with the music. So
It takes you into that Zen place.
yeah.
uh, when you look at this album, outside of the song that didn't make it, the 10-minute track that didn't make it, that perhaps one day we'll see it on an EP. At least that's where that's what I'm going with. That's the story that I'm selling here. So, outside of that track, was there any song that made it on the record that gave you a few gray hairs?
I almost want to say all of them. um,
I
probably
don't find
like
that hard to believe.
probably the hardest one was the Heavenly Coil, just because it goes in a lot of different places. So, and it gets pretty layered by the end of it. um yeah, that one was sort of hard to kind of think of where it would go. I just kind of had to like take a step back at certain points.
It was hard to see the forest from the trees.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you see this album having just one strength, or is this a record that lives off of the quality of all the elements that make it up?
Yeah, I would definitely say it has to be taken as a whole. Like it definitely makes sense that we release promo videos and that they're not complete 15-minute long like singles, because that doesn't make any sense. So I have no problem with like releasing half the song for like the long songs, but I definitely view the videos as like basically like trailers or like
Mhm.
promos to get people to listen to the whole thing, because I think the whole thing is what you got to really get the whole feel and vibe of it.
Yeah, it's a movie cinematic score style record. So listening to chunks of it, it's almost like just watching bits and pieces of a movie and then trying to make sense of what the whole movie was all about. You're not going to get it. You need to sit down and listen to the whole record in sequence.
Yeah, I definitely say that's one of the overall, that's kind of one of the big ideas for Untamed Land as a project altogether, is the whole like album as movie or like a cinematic album idea. I've always really kind of been interested in if that is something that could even be done. So
Being the only man behind the steering wheel on Untamed Land, does that give you freedom or does that give you headaches?
I guess both. Freedom, because I don't have to, I don't know, like argue with people about, oh, what should the sound for this be, or like, what's our influences or anything like this. But definitely it's definitely a lot to undertake all at once. So I don't know, kind of both.
little bit of column A and column B. Last question for you. As you start to perhaps look a little bit beyond the record and you're able to look back and see all the work that went into making this album, did you discover something new about yourself during the process of creating this record that perhaps was hidden?
Um, I'd probably say so. Not sure what that would be. Um, I definitely grew up over the course of it, I would say. Kind of became less scatterbrained and more focused as a person. I don't know if that has to do with the album or just me just getting older, but yeah, it definitely was kind of a journey altogether that I went through. So
Well, and you give us a journey to go through listening to this record. I'm a huge fan of spaghetti western, so in black metal. So you kind of brought both those worlds together, and I thank you for that. I was absolutely blown away by this record. It has such a cinematic, easy listening vibe to it. It's just magnificent. It's something you don't listen to every day. I can guarantee you that. I never heard an album like this before in my entire life, and I've listened to a lot of music. So thank you for putting together a record as strong as this one, and thank you for taking the time today.
yeah, no problem. That's awesome that you like it so much.
It's just my worlds colliding in a musical sense. The things that I never thought I wanted to hear on a record, and there they were, and now here I am. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like it was perfect. Not in a million years could I think that somebody would put together something like this, and it was such for an album that I felt like had some long tracks. It was really easy to listen to it. It didn't feel cumbersome. You know what I mean? It felt like it was an easy listening experience. You just kind of got lost in the journey that it has to offer to the listener.
I guess that's the idea right there.
Well, you're the man. You're the man. Patrick, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. All the best with the release on October 8th. You definitely deserve it. A lot of work went into this record, and it's a magnificent album. So take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
See you.